Edward Ed Calhoun sat in his large, empty kitchen sipping his coffee. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a soft golden glow over the countertops, but it was still too early for him to feel anything but the weight of the day ahead. The house was quiet, almost unnervingly so. His daughters, Emily and Sophie, were still asleep in their rooms, though he knew it wouldn't be long before they started arguing again. It had become their routine: arguments, silence, and more arguments. There was always tension in the house since the passing of his wife, and Ed didn't know how to fix it. He wasn't even sure if he could. The death of his wife, Claire, had left a hole in their lives that seemed impossible to fill. It had been 2 years since she passed, but the sadness still lingered, thick and heavy in the air. Ed had tried to be both mother and father to his girls, but it wasn't working. Emily, who had once been so full of life, now seemed to have a wall built around her emotions. Sophie, the youngest, had grown quieter and more withdrawn by the day. Ed felt like a stranger in his own home. After months of struggling, Ed had come to a decision. He needed help. More specifically, his daughters needed help. That's when he found the ad for a caretaker, and more importantly, a healer, a young woman from the Apache community. Someone with experience in traditional ways of helping others heal had agreed to work with families like his. Ed had heard whispers about these healing methods, how people in the Apache community were known for their deep connection to nature and their ability to heal both the body and mind. At first, it had sounded a little odd to him, but he was desperate. Desperate enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, this might be the answer. Leon arrived that afternoon. She wasn't what Ed had expected. He had imagined someone older, perhaps someone with a calming presence but a stern demeanor. Instead, Leon was young, probably in her 20s, with a quiet confidence about her. She wore simple clothes, mostly neutral tones, and carried with her a sense of calm that seemed to fill the room the moment she stepped inside. "Hello, Mr. Calhoun," she said with a soft smile. Her voice was steady, unhurried. Ed shook her hand, though he couldn't help but feel a little uncertain about the whole situation. "Thank you for coming, Leon. I'm not sure what to expect, but, well, we could use some help." Leon nodded, her expression unchanged. "I understand. Healing is a process, not something that happens overnight. But I believe with time we can find a way to help your daughters." She walked over to the living room where Emily and Sophie were sitting, both of them looking at her with suspicion. Emily especially didn't seem to care much for the stranger in their home. She crossed her arms tightly over her chest, refusing to make eye contact. Sophie, on the other hand, just stared at Leon in silence, her large eyes filled with curiosity, though she didn't speak. "This is Emily and Sophie," Ed said, though he could see they weren't exactly thrilled to meet Leon. "I know you've been through a lot," Leon said softly, addressing the girls. "I'm not here to replace anyone or force you to do anything you don't want to. My job is simply to help." Sophie blinked at her, and for a moment, Ed saw a flicker of something in his daughter's eyes, a mix of confusion and hope. "Let's start with something small," Leon suggested. "A little ceremony, just to begin the process of getting to know each other." "I promise it won't be anything strange," Emily scoffed, rolling her eyes. "I don't need some ceremony, I'm fine." But Leon didn't react to Emily's sharp tone. Instead, she simply smiled and nodded. "I understand. But sometimes the smallest things can make the biggest difference." That evening, Leon prepared a small, peaceful ritual in the backyard, a quiet moment of connection with nature. There were no strange incantations, no mysterious symbols, just a circle of stones and a few simple tools that Leon used to light a small fire. Ed stood a few feet away, unsure of what to think, but he didn't stop her. After all, what else could they try? Sophie, always more open to new things, was the first to approach the circle of stones, her small feet brushing against the grass as she walked slowly toward Leon. Emily, on the other hand, stood back, arms crossed, stubbornly refusing to participate. Leon smiled gently at Sophie. "Would you like to sit with me for a moment?" she asked. Sophie nodded and sat down beside her. Leon guided her hands into a simple position, palms open to the sky. "Let's take a few deep breaths, shall we? Just breathe in deeply and out slowly." Sophie copied Leon's actions, her face still and calm. Ed watched, amazed at how effortlessly Leon seemed to connect with Sophie. It was like the tension in his daughter's shoulders melted away with each breath. For the first time in months, Sophie seemed peaceful, but Emily wasn't ready to let go of her anger just yet. She stood at the edge of the yard, frowning as she watched the scene unfold. Her jaw was clenched, her eyes narrowed with skepticism. Leon glanced up at her, sensing the girl's discomfort. "Emily, I know you're upset, but sometimes letting go of that anger can help you feel lighter." "I don't need your help," Emily snapped. "You don't know anything about me." Leon's gaze softened and she didn't press the issue. "I don't need to know anything about you, Emily. I just want to help you find peace." For a moment there was silence. Emily stared at Leon and Ed could see the storm brewing in his daughter's eyes. But before she could say anything else, Sophie spoke. "Dad, it feels good," Sophie said quietly, looking up at Ed with a serene expression on her face. Ed's heart ached. Sophie had always been the quiet one, the one who kept her emotions buried deep. To see her so relaxed, so calm, made him realize how much he had missed in his own family, how much he had missed in Sophie's heart. He took a deep breath, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself to hope. Maybe Leon could help them after all. That night, as the fire burned low and the stars filled the sky above, Ed stood next to Leon by the embers. "Thank you for doing that," he said quietly. "I know it's just a small step, but it felt like something changed." Leon smiled, her gaze still fixed on the flickering flames. "It's only the beginning, Mr. Calhoun. Healing takes time, but the first step is always the hardest." Ed nodded, a knot loosening in his chest. For the first time in months, he felt a glimmer of hope for his family's future. The next few days were different in the Calhoun household. Ed noticed it the moment he walked through the door after a long day at work. The house, which had once felt cold and silent, now hummed with a soft, peaceful energy. Sophie was smiling more, her laughter echoing through the halls as she played in the garden with Leon. Emily, though still distant, had started spending more time with her sister, joining them outside rather than staying holed up in her room. It wasn't a perfect transformation, but it was progress, small but real. Leon's presence had a subtle but powerful effect on the girls. She wasn't a miracle worker, and she never pretended to be, but somehow her calm demeanor, her patience, and the quiet way she guided the girls through the healing process made a difference. One evening, after a particularly long day, Ed sat at the kitchen table, watching Leon help Sophie with her homework. The soft glow of the kitchen lights bathed the room in a warm golden light. Sophie, usually shy and withdrawn, seemed more focused than usual, asking questions with genuine interest. Leon explained things slowly and clearly, never rushing her, never losing her patience. "How was school today?" Ed asked, turning his attention to Emily, who was sitting at the other end of the table, sketching in her notebook. Emily didn't look up, but after a moment she muttered, "It was fine." Ed sighed. He wanted to break through to her, to reach her in a way he hadn't been able to for so long. But Emily wasn't ready. She hadn't been ready for months, maybe even longer. He could see the anger still bubbling just beneath the surface, like a storm waiting to break. Leon, sensing the tension in the room, quietly stood up and moved toward Emily. She didn't say anything at first, just sat down next to her, her presence gentle but strong. "I know it's hard, Emily," Leon said softly, her voice as calm as always. "But sometimes the hardest thing to do is let yourself feel." Emily didn't respond, her pencil moving swiftly across the page as she focused on her drawing. Leanne didn't push her. She simply waited, letting the silence settle between them. After a moment, Emily spoke, her voice low and almost hesitant. "I don't want to feel," she said, her words sharp and full of pain. "If I start feeling, I'll lose control. I'll fall apart." "I can't afford that." Leon nodded, understanding more than she let on. She had seen this before. The walls people built to protect themselves, the fear that if they let their emotions out, they wouldn't be able to put them back together. But Leon also knew that sometimes the only way to heal was to face those emotions head on. "You're stronger than you think, Emily," Leon said quietly, "and it's okay to be vulnerable. In fact, it's the bravest thing you can do." For a long time, Emily didn't respond. She kept her eyes on her sketchbook, but Leon could see the tension in her shoulders slowly begin to ease. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. That evening, Ed went to bed with a sense of unease gnawing at him. Things were better, yes, but they weren't fixed, not yet. He knew there was something deeper, something buried beneath the surface that needed to be addressed. He just wasn't sure how to reach it. The next day, as the sun began to set, Leon invited Ed to join her and the girls for another ceremony. This time, she didn't explain much. She simply said, "Tonight we'll go deeper. We'll explore the things we're afraid to face." Ed hesitated. He wasn't sure he was ready for what that might mean, but he trusted Leon. He trusted her wisdom. The ceremony was held in the backyard again, but this time, the atmosphere was different. Leon had set up a circle of stones, but there was something new, a small fire crackling in the center. The flames flickered, casting dancing shadows on the grass. Leon asked them all to sit quietly, and for the first time in a long time, Ed felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. It was as if the entire house had fallen silent, waiting. "We are going to release the things that weigh on us," Leon said. "Not everything, just the things we're ready to let go of." Sophie, who had grown accustomed to these moments, sat cross-legged in the grass, her hands resting gently on her knees. Emily, however, remained standing at the edge of the circle, her arms crossed defensively over her chest. She had learned to hide her feelings, and she wasn't about to let them surface now. Leon's eyes met Ed's. She gave him a small, reassuring nod. "It's all right to be scared," she said quietly. "It's all right to take small steps." The fire crackled softly, and the silence deepened. Leon then closed her eyes, letting the stillness wash over her before she began to speak in soft, almost melodic tones. "Breathe in, breathe out. Let go of the things you can no longer carry. Allow the fire to take away your burdens." Ed watched Leon, her calm presence grounding him. He could see the way she held the space, how she allowed the moment to unfold without rushing it. He realized, as he sat there in the growing darkness, that he had never truly given himself the space to heal. He had always been so focused on fixing things, on making everything perfect, that he had ignored his own pain. But now, in this quiet, sacred moment, he could feel it. He could feel the sorrow and the guilt creeping to the surface. It was time to let go. "Emily," Leon's voice broke the silence, soft but firm. "What are you holding on to?" Emily stiffened, her eyes flashing with defiance. "Nothing." Leon didn't push her, but she didn't look away either. "You can't keep running from it, Emily. You can't hide from your own heart forever." For a moment, Ed thought Emily might leave. She seemed on the verge of walking away, but then something in her expression shifted. Her eyes flickered with emotion, and her arms slowly unfolded. She walked into the circle and sat down next to Sophie. "I don't want to be angry anymore," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't want to be so broken." The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and raw. Ed's heart ached for her, but he was also proud. Proud that she had found the courage to admit it, even if just to herself. Leon smiled, a small knowing smile. "You don't have to do it all at once, Emily. Healing is a process. But you've taken the first step." The ceremony continued for hours, and by the time it ended, the fire had burned low, and the stars above were bright and clear. The Calhouns sat together in silence, a sense of calm settling over them. For the first time in a long time, they felt connected. Connected not just to each other, but to themselves. That night, as Ed lay in bed, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of relief. There was still a long road ahead, but he no longer felt like he was walking it alone. Sophie had taken her first step toward healing. Emily had opened up in a way he never thought possible, and he had learned to let go of his own guilt. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he was beginning to believe that, together, they could face it. And for the first time in a long time, Ed allowed himself to believe that the brokenness in their home could be healed, one small step at a time.